programs which we have organized in the programs which we will organize in the future, all the programs will be happening with the position of a chassis value of out of this community, especially Muslims and Dalits. So, then question of agency, we in sitting in Delhi, we every now and then we see there is a seminar and authors are happening, but the question of agency often get lost, right? So, keeping that perspective in mind, we started this idea of fraternal dialogue. So, the today's topic, Travails of Muslim public psyche, which we will be discussing with the question of secularism, is also the outcome of the question of agency and xenophobia. When I say this, I will not just take 1 or 2 minutes because like slightly already with us. So when we talked about when we even where the other question of a state, so in a layman thinking, there are various abstract ideas comes to a communism, secularism, secularization. So this type. So why this topic? There are 2 set of theoretical understanding which has been not dominating, but one side of perspective was dominating. That is literary discourse of understanding of secularism. So in this, I can recall there was a scholar, I think he is no more. His name is P. Scholarship. So long back he came up with a book called India as a Secular State. So that book is a first robust defense of the liberal democracy of India. So basically, that book is basing a root of Hinduism and Islam and all the different discourses. So secularism is copying from, we say that it has 3 pillars. The first one is the status with citizenship. In citizenship is saying that citizenship is very neutral when it comes to the religion and nothing about root the religion. Then second pillar obviously is the separation of church and state. This talking about. Then the third pillar is saying of notion of belief. It is saying that the belief has nothing to do with the idea of secularism. And these 3 broader ideas. He is one of the first scholars which he produced in the defense of a religion for the liberal discourse of religion. This is a dominating discourse, जिसके बुनियाद पे राजीव भार्गव साहब लोग से प्रिंसिपल डिस्कस होना चाहिए, आसिफुद्दीन साहब लोग से हिंदुइज्म का डिसाइडर और टॉलरेंस कल्चर is good. Now the second discourse comes from my understanding is Al-Natas. So Natas Sahib is saying a couple of months he passed away. Now Natas Sahib is coming with a framework. He is saying that secularism is not only a political arrangement which tolerance and other scholars have argued, rather it is a secularization, which means the idea of secularism is stripping the idea of spirituality from the individual. If you will go with the idea of tolerance with different discourses, that he called it the tragedy of a loss of other. Allah does say. And he is saying that this is where the methodology is getting lost. Proper methodology when we discuss the question of this way in the idea of secularism. So that lack of discipline methodology is there, which I think the speaker will be addressing. And I mean, this is the core idea behind this particular talk. So, with this, I would like to invite our speaker, Dr. Nizamuddin Ahmad. He used to teach in Jindal School. Now he is running a foundation work for Mishkat. So, with this, I invited to his table stage. He will be speaking like for 45 minutes, then after that they will get to it. Ask. He can see us. See. Yes, sorry. So someone thank you for this organizing and optimizing this in the most informal way. Because when you have very
formal structures, procedures, simulation and all, that has its own method, that has its own limitation. We can say certain things, may not say certain things. You can engage in certain ways, you cannot be doing certain. That is unhappy, that is dead. I will start with the topic. Why the topic was framed in that way. Of course, the topic, whatever Kalmas Bhai is mentioned, that's their discussion, the background with it. But the topic largely got gone deep. So I should tell you why I have framed the topic that way. Before we go into the details. There are a couple of reasons. One is I wanted it to be a conversation that continues or that has a past to it. And I did not want to repeat what I have already said. So that kind of gets a little boring, at least for me. So this conversation that we are having today is a continuation of what I have said on the past. So I did a podcast that the very first podcast that I did was on the problems of Muslims, the Muslim issue did it. That was the one. And then the second what I did was on the need of a public intellectual who has a Muslim identity. So the title was Why We Need Muslim Public Intellectuals. This conversation is an extension of that, because when you say that, there has to be someone who speaks in the public, then the question that follows is, what is this public? Okay? How does the person think? And how does the person engage with it? And what would be the arguments that the person makes? So this conversation is about that. Okay? There are a couple of other things which are still left, but probably we can engage with that later. So that is one thing. The other thing is I engage with this idea of public psyche. I think a couple of years back, I tried to engage with that in an opinion piece. And my intention was, since I have already, kind of highlighted earlier that there is something like that, even if that was there in, let's say, 200 words or 500 words, it was a little piece. I should again not try to repeat the same thing, but probably I can pick from there and try to combine whatever I said in recent past and try to say something which combines both of these elements. So that is the reason why the title is like that. So the Travails of Muslim Public Psyche. What is a Muslim Public Psyche? I tried to deal with that earlier. Decoding the language of a Muslim public intellectual. Muslim public intellectual I have already discussed. Who should be, what should be. There are many other things left which I think if Allah allows me and if I have the capacity and the agency and the freedom to do that, I'll try to explain further on what I think is the work and the method of being lecturer. Anyways, that's it. So this is all about the idea. One more thing before I go a bit more into the topic is the use of term Muslim on both the fronts. Right. So there is a public psyche which I am calling as Muslim. There is a public intellectual whom I am calling as Muslim. So what is the reason I am doing that? I am not using a term in a neutral fashion. But because in my understanding, and my understanding comes from the way I have read, engaged with and thought about, academics is largely about perspectives, theorization and perspectives. People might have a different take on it. But my understanding is any of these categories that you create to define something is not a neutral category. any conversation that you do has to have some purpose. Any conversation that you do has some intention and has some direction. Why do you do a conversation? Why do you do a transaction? Why do you write something? Even if you write something in your own diary, like you do diary noting at the night, you write it for some part. There is always an audience to what we speak in whatever you write. When you do diary noting, you do it to read it as a second person. You read it as a second person. You're not the person who wrote it. You are if you are a person with someone else when you read it. So every piece of writing is for someone else. Everything that you speak is for someone else. Which means if you speak to your own self, then you are blabbering. Then you are probably a bad person. Okay? You have to speak to someone else. And therefore, every speech has to have an audience. It has to have target audience. A research article has a different audience, an opinion piece has a different audience. Okay? An informal setup, the speech, whatever I speak will be different. I will deal with the same topic in the classroom in a different sense. Because you are not my students. In the classroom, they are my students. I am not teaching here a subject. In the classroom, I am teaching a subject. Okay, so the treatment of the topic is different. And therefore, it is always important to tell people what you are, what you're talking about, and who's your audience. Okay. So public intellectual generally has been used in a neutral fashion. You know, you read the writings of, if you read the writings of Indian scholars, you know, we have Rovina Thapar, people call Arulagi Roy for great intellectual, people call Javed Akhtar Sahab for great intellectual. You go to, Edward Said, that you pick any one of them. The larger trend that you will see in the use of public intellectual is an assumption that a left intellectual is a public intellectual. That's an assumption largely. Okay? A person who has left leaning, a person who is critical. So there are two assumptions in aspect. Number one, a person who is critical of something is left. That's an assumption. Okay? And the second is, the public intellectual is largely a left person. Left. Now, Albaz Bhai highlighted the name of Al-Aqas. He is someone who could be or who can be understood as a public intellectual, but in order to understand them completely, you have to write the name Muslim. Why? Because the tradition initiated it too. The training he has, the audience he has, the kind of work he does is actually largely a Muslim-centric work. Okay. Now, someone might say that, you're fragmenting Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, secular, non-secular, liberal. You're fragmenting. My argument is, I'm not fragmenting it, I'm telling you what it is. Those who say it is neutral, they are hiding it. There is nothing called as neutral. Right? The liberal world order is a Christian world order. You go and see it. The kind of universalism that the liberal world order pursues is a Christian universalism. It's not a Hindu universalism, it is not a Muslim universalism. Let me give you an example. In a Christian worldview, a very interesting aspect of Christian worldview is that the whole world belongs to God. The entire humanity is the children of God, and they have to align with the godly, qualities or values, whatever God wants. So it is seemingly very neutral. You use that methodology, you can very well say that, and it would be very easy for you to say that democracy is universal in the same way throughout the world. It's very easy for you to say human dignity is universal throughout the world. Okay? You not go into further segmentation, you will not go further into specifications. But let me let me go to the Islamic worldview. The Islamic worldview is a layered worldview. At one, it says all humanity. It addresses all of humanity, Ayyuhan nas. Okay? And then it also addresses Ya Ayyuhal Muslimun, which is the Muslims. And in both of these speeches, the language is a universal language. Okay? So when it is saying Ya Ayyuhal Muslimun, it's not talking about the Muslims of 7th century. It is also talking about the Muslims of today. It is also talking about the Muslims of future. It's not only talking about the Muslims of the Arab, it is also talking about the Muslims of Germany, Spain, Africa. So which means it is universal. Time-wise universal, constituency-wise universal, language-wise universal. Similarly, when the term Ayyuhan Nas is used, it's also used in universal terms. For all of humanity, for all times to come. For all of humanity at this point of time throughout the world. Okay? So, the universal that Islam will use will be a different universal. Sometimes it will only address Muslims, sometimes it will address everyone. Okay? So what I try to say is the languages are different, the way categories are used, these are different. Okay? The Jewish understanding of universal will be completely different. Why? Because it is geography centric, it is race centric, it is history centric, it is text centric. So the universal will be a projection of that culture throughout the world. It would be a projection of that understanding throughout the world, and that will be called as a universal understanding. So it would get different type. So what I'm trying to tell you is, when we say something is universal, when we say human dignity is universal, what are you talking about? That's what in law and all those things people say, well, that's what we were discussing. Okay. In Muslim states, the equality between men and women is very differently construed as in US. Why? Because inheritance laws are different. Okay? But the Muslims do not believe in equality of men and women. They believe in that. But they qualify it in a certain sense. Okay? So you have different meanings. That's the reason why I am using the term Muslim. Public intellectual is a Muslim. Public psyche is a Muslim. So it's not a public psyche which is a general public psyche, because the general public psyche will not have any content. And if you really want to have a content in the public psyche, then logically speaking, it will be the content of the majority of the population. Let me give you an example. What does that mean? I studied in AMU. I did my graduation in schooling from AMU. Everyone in Aligarh Muslim University says Assalamu alaikum. My question is Assalamu alaikum a secular category? Is it a secular category? No, it is not. It is a Muslim category. But everyone uses it. Muslim, non-Muslim, everyone. Why? Because the culture is dominantly Muslim. So the dominant culture defines the content of the reading. The dominant culture tells you what reading is. But it is not singular in that sense. It may seem out as something that allows you to engage with each other in a certain way. But it has cultural definition. It has a history, it has a tradition. Okay? So any conceptual category, if you assume it is a neutral category, in my understanding it is not. The only way to create a neutral category is through mutual agreement, is through mutual dialogue. It cannot be an assumed neutral category. It is not possible. Why? Because the neutral category would always be defined by the dominant culture. This is going logic. Now let us look at the further elements into what we are discussing today. Let's leave it because that's key. Yes. Probably we are technical space. So that's the thing. Now let us come to then the content of the book that we should have. What are the decoding the language of Muslim public intellectual based Nasa? Again, one more thing. I tried to address that earlier, but I think that's important to address now. Here, and that is the need of public intellectuals. Why is a public intellectual important, and what the person is all about? See, there are scholars. The category of scholars is that they write in their own discipline. That's one thing. They are disciplinary. A physicist writes in physics, and a law professor writes in law. A historian writes in history. The discipline. That's one thing. The second thing is the scholars, they largely speak to each other. It's a peer-peer game. So the scholars cite each other, read each other, write for each other. The audience for a disciplinary scholarship is a discipline itself and your peers. The audience is not the public. Since the audience is not the public, the language is very technical, thick and difficult. If you try to solve every step and you try to explain every step, people say, "Yeah, you are a fool. Go, yeah. No, you think I understand what you're saying." Don't break it into bits. I know what it is. You said secularism, I understand what is secularism. You just move ahead there. Don't define it. Okay? You said article of the Indian Constitution. I know what is article of the Indian Constitution. You just go right out to that. So they already know the discipline. The language is discipline-centric and the language has the audience of the peers. When you talk about journalists, the audience is the public. The audience of a journalist is a public. The work of a journalist is to explain what is happening, okay, on an everyday basis. Therefore, the language would be very public-centered. The language would not be thick. That will not be the nature of language. The language would be simple language. And since they have to cater to the public, the language would be framed in a way that people would want to listen to you. They are attracted to you because they are public-centered. That is why you use weights and everything else. That's why you compete with each other. Okay? And then you have the language of politician. The language of politician is issue-centric and consequency-centric. Okay? The issues that the politician think can be turned into politics. A politics can be generated out of it. Those issues will be fundamental to politician. It can be anything. It can be an incident, it can be a story, anything. And a politician always speaks to a particular audience, which is his or her constituency. Either the constituency is defined by geography or membership of an organization, or political, whatever it is. In all of these things, the roles are very clearly defined. The role of a scholar is defined, the role of politician is defined. Not only defined, understood. That's a better term. Everyone knows what a politician does. Everyone knows what a journalist does. But there is one category, one type of people that are missing here. And that is someone who binds all of it together. You need someone who binds all of it together because these are different fragments. They have different audiences. Okay? Who is a public intellectual? A public intellectual will be someone who can bind all of it together for you. Who has a scholarly rooting, who knows the subject, who has a training in the subject, who speaks publicly in the language public understands, but does not break it into a journalistic language or does not twist it in a political sense. Okay? How would you define? So which means a politician speaks to the people, but the intellectual speaks to the public. Public is different from the people. Public is the space where people reside. So public is not only about people, it is also about institutions, it is also about market, it is about everything. So this person must speak to the public. Public means not to the people. He is not trying to convince people in a certain way. He is not trying to inform the people like a journalist does. He is trying to shape the public conversation, whatever conversations are happening, the range of conversations. He is trying to tell you what are the issues. He actually tells you what are the issues. He actually tells you what is happening around. He tells you what is the problem. What is the problem with the university? What is the problem with the society? What is the problem with I would say politicians, political parties, and everyone? So this is important. So if you have someone who pitches in and he tries to explain what is happening around. For example, someone says, you know what, the use of social media is killing the critical understanding of the people. It is killing the critical understanding of the students. Please do not allow cell phones in the classroom. Please limit the use of social media for the people. Please limit pornography access. This is telling people what is happening, what is wrong. This is not journalism. This is not scholarship. This is not politics. This is something different. Now, why do we need people like this? We need people like this because the scholarship on public intellectuality, you go to, Edward Said, Agamben, and Foucault, Rovira Hathar in India, if you try to touch them all of them say one thing, which is common, and the common thing is, this is one person who keeps the conscience of the society. He is fundamental for the existence of the society because he tells you what is right, and wrong. So your Islamic principle है ना, you promote good and forbid bad. It is fundamental for the intellectuality because you are not catering to any particular discipline. The disciplinary boundaries are not there. If you are a human rights scholar, you write about human rights. Whether you believe in it or you don't believe in it, it doesn't matter because that gives you obligation, that gives you access, that gives you career growth. It's not like that. You write and write because that kind of literature gets published, and therefore you are limited to that. Okay? So this is one important thing, and this is one thing which is inherently tied to, in my personal understanding, the Islamic worldview. Islam fundamentally says this. If you see something happening which is wrong, try to prohibit. There are stages to it. You cannot remain silent. Why? Because this is wrong. Now, you see what you are going to do. How you are going to do it. Okay. That pushes us to the next question, which is the core of the topic today, and that is the language that should be employed. There are a couple of things that I want you to consider. Number one, the fundamental thing is the language is defined by your capacity, the capacity in which you want to speak. As I said, if I am a professor, I want to be a professor, I will speak one way. If I want to be an advocate, I will speak another. You ask a principal. He is a politician in the parliament, and while in public gatherings, but inside the boardroom, he is an advocate. And then when he is part of the government, he is a government official. He uses different languages. Okay. So you need to understand in what capacity, in what context to achieve what you are using the language. You have to be very conscious about. That's fundamental. One thing that is fundamental is that if you are a Muslim, you cannot escape being a Muslim. It is not possible. It is absolutely not possible because the Sharia says, Islam says, the Quran says, and the Prophet, you are born as a Muslim and you die as a Muslim. Which means your birth and your death, they both are for a Muslim. Which means everything else in between is a Muslim. The way you are sitting here on chair is also wisdom. Now, it may seem to you as a secular thing. Now, this is very interesting. Why? You need to understand one thing, which is very fundamental here. The kind of food that you eat is the kind of food everyone eats. The kind of dress that you wear is the kind of dress everyone else wears. The kind of social interaction that you have is the kind of social interaction everyone else has. Which means all of these activities are similar to everyone else. Are these secular activities? Yes, these are secular activities. But these are all Islamic activities. My Islam does not prohibit you on that. Islam asks you to eat whatever is halal. So if I eat dal chawal and someone else who is a non-Muslim also eats dal chawal, I'm not doing a non-Islamic thing. So 90% of my seemingly secular activities are already part of Islamic framework. They are already pushed by the Islamic framework. You don't have to grapple with it. The things which are not part of that Islamic framework, there you have to negotiate, strategize, grapple, and which is a very little part. So which means when you speak, inherently you are speaking as a Muslim. Until and unless it's prohibited, or you're going across you're kind of violating the boundary. So you speak, you do whatever it is as a Muslim, and which means theology is central for you. Theological framework is central to you. Someone might say that when you are talking about theology, then it becomes complicated because you have different schools and these different fragments. I would say the theology that you engage with in public is most of it simple. All of this is a simple logic. All of it is a simple logic. Buying a bus ticket, it is already processed. The religion says you follow the process. There is a method, there is a law, you follow the law. So there is nothing controversial there. The way you go to the classroom, there is nothing controversial there. The way you speak is nothing controversial. The way you write is nothing controversial. The way you group around is nothing controversial. Is there any faith required in it? No, it is not. Where do you enter into faith? For example, the way you pray. Okay? The way you pray. The way you deal with Islamic rulings with respect to certain issues. There it is easy for you because then you can go back to the scholarship, to your school, to whatever it is, and you can seek answers. But most of the time, whatever you do is seemingly secular and non-contradictory to Islamic values and concepts. That's one thing. Which means to adopt a theological framework is not a problematic thing. It's very easy for you. Okay. The second thing is, you also live here as part of a particular culture. There is a trend, there is a method of Islamic culture in India. There is a history to the culture. There is a particular way in which Muslims have lived in India. They are identified in a particular way. Now, if you follow it, there is a problem. The answer is no. There is no problem until and unless it contradicts with the theology. Until and unless it contradicts with the principles of the theology, it is allowed. So that again is not a problem for you. So I can be a Muslim wearing this shirt and jeans. Why? Because Muslims stay like everyone else. Probably some other country this might be seen as a Western dress, but not now in India. Probably 20 years back this might have been seen as a Western dress, but not now. So again, wearing this and moving like this is not controversial, is not contrary to the religion. So theologically, it's easy for you to engage. Culturally, it's easy for you to engage. The third is, as the citizen, the language of the constitution, the politics of the day. Is it difficult for you to engage with? The answer is no, from your front. It is not. Why? Because you are an Indian. If you are an Indian, theoretically speaking, you should have access to everything that everyone else gets. Which means it should be When you are trying to get your Aadhaar card, the process should be the same. If you are trying to file a case in the court, the process would be the same. If you are arrested, the process would be the same. Okay? If you argue in the court, the process will be the same. Now, this is where it becomes complicated. Why? Because you assume that everything is the same for everyone. But here, it is not the case. Why? Because you see that the way the arrest is happening is different. The way the arguments are happening in the court is different. The way the citizenship is being defined is different. The way your civic life is being defined, the way your housing and your movement is different. So which means the language of a public intellectual, if you're talking about, should mostly deal with the constitutional aspects, the democratic aspects, not the theological aspects. They always is. If you have any problem, go and ask your mufti and scholar and anyone else. If it's a cultural thing, you see what is the culture around. So let me share that with you. Most of the language that you engage with, that you will engage with, would be the language of constitution, would be the language of representation, would be the language of agency, would be the language of democracy. Okay? And therefore, there you will have to see how do I deal with it. Remember one thing, that theoretically you can use all of these things. Theoretically speaking, every lecturer has the same capacity, same, access, everything. Theoretically, that's what it is. Theoretically, the constitution should apply to everyone. Theoretically, the court should allow everyone. Okay? But practically, that's not happening. Practically, since this is not happening, the solution for you would be to enter into strategies to communicate. I'll just give you one example. Shaprimala case is before the Board of India, Supreme Court of India. 9-judge bench. 9 judges are sitting to decide the Shaprimala issue. Tushar Mehta, who is Solicitor General, only yesterday, day before yesterday, he made an argument. He said, Your Lordship, the courts should not enter into religion. The court's rationality is different. The religious rationality is different. The courts should not enter into it. This is with respect to the access to Hindu places of worship that the Shaprimala gives. Pick uniform civil code. What is the argument of the government? The argument of the government is the court must rationalize common existence. The court must apply same law to everyone. Religion cannot be beyond the rationality of the law. You understand what is happening here? The same government, the same agency is making two different arguments. This is called as strategy argumentation. As someone wants to speak to the public, you should be conscious of it. And if you are conscious of it, your language would also be a strategic language. The way you speak, your language will also be strategic. For example, you look at the hijab case. In the hijab case, before the Supreme Court of India, the question is whether Muslim girls can be allowed to wear hijab and go to the classes and the colleges. Okay? What is the ground to make this argument? There are 3 grounds at least to make this argument. Number 1, freedom of religion. I have the freedom of religion. I have the freedom to pursue my religion. That's 1. What is the second ground? The second ground is freedom of expression. I can express, I can wear whatever I want, I can express in whatever manner I want. And what is the third ground? The third ground is right to education. If you do not allow women to go with hijab to the classroom, they probably will not be able to get education. Because that is central to their belief, they are very much national. These are three different grounds. You go to the board. What ground will you choose? What ground will you choose? Anyone? Which of these arguments will you choose? Right religion. Okay. Huh? Freedom of religion. You will use that argument which is accepted by the court. Okay? If you understand then the word is averse to freedom of religion, you will say, Your Lordship, this is freedom of expression. And if the court is averse to it, you will say, Your Lordship, this is right to education. What is happening here? You are using the language that every common person uses in this country. But the intention for you is a religious intention. What is the intention? To safeguard something which is religiously obligated upon you. Something that you want to pursue as part of religion. And you are using the language which is the language of the public, the language available to everyone, and the language that works. So the language of a public intellectual, but why we need public intellectuals we have already discussed. Who is a public intellectual we have already discussed. What is a public psyche? I think I did not discuss that much, but let me explain. This will be the last point I think where I would touch. I think I have taken already a lot of time. Public psyche would be the way you engage in public. With what kind of psychology, with what kind of mindset you engage with the public. What is the mostly public psyche? When you visit this place, when you talk to people around, the general public psyche is the psyche of vulnerability, crisis, and negativity. That is the public psyche that you have. Lack of confidence is the public psyche that you have. Okay? It is difficult for you to carry a beard and then go into the classroom. It is difficult for you to pray. Why was it difficult? Because of the incident that happened. So, how about you frame Muslim public psyche? The Muslim public psyche needs to be given confidence. If you are not confident in public, if you are not engaged in public. Okay? And how would you be confident? You will be confident when you are able to use the language that is used by everyone else. If you do not have access in the language, if you do not have capacity to engage in that language, if you do not have the ability to choose the options, what you speak and what you not speak, in the public space, which is a strategic space, you will have less confidence. But if you know what it is all about, it will be wonderful. But who will tell you what it is all about? You need people to pitch in and tell you what are your issues. You need people to pitch in and tell you how these issues must be tackled. You need people to pitch in how you must pursue this cause. Because general public does not have the ability. And the scholars, journalists, politicians, they do not have the ability because they don't do this. That's not their expertise, that's not their field. So I'll stop here. If you have any questions or anything, this is live shop. This is about sound.
Thank you so much, Nizamuddin Sahab. Now, to put the floor to my session, with a small question from my side. I think after listening to your talk, there you touched the idea of theoretical relevance and based with the public idea. So I was wondering how, so you mentioned the Rivara case, course and all. So I'm asking this question from a perspective of physics. There is something called causality and there is something called causality. One layman question of right things, people which always quotes in a public space. Whether for you, Sharia is the theme of competence. It's a very game and argument difficult. So if we see this in a public psyche, when you think in it, think alone, close your eyes, what's happening around. All this is happening under the light of what the people are, how people are the world. So when you, so like you say, when I talk about I love class, is critique, repetition critique of liberal discourse of secularism. So he said that it detaches you from the metaphysical root of understanding of religion. So how do I see Indian constitution? When I close my eyes and think about the question of sovereignty in the philosophical sense, right? So for example, so why it is बहन में सवाल क्यों आए? Because when I talk to the people who are not in academics or like with the people like say daily wage workers. So I would be wrong, but they see Indian constitution as a ethical document, which is equal for all. It would not be much see the belief. So we should go with what constitution says. Today the constitution is saying this man does not belong to us. You should reject that. Today constitution is saying that you cannot give Azan in loudspeaker. Today constitution is saying you cannot pray in your book, like seasons happened. So how should I accept in that constitution the logic serves? Not saying to, and I am saying how we should deal with the question of sovereignty and in a constitution. This is a question, not the point. Take a question.
Let me answer that question. I'll answer that question and can take others. Because I think this is a very question, and in a sense it's a tricky question, sir. See, my understanding has been till now, the way I have arrived, my present understanding. I am not saying that this would be my user understanding as well. Probably I am able to appreciate things, I am able to understand things in a better way, so probably my future understanding may be different. But as of now, my current understanding is, if you want to theorize a solution for the Indian Muslims in India, if you want to come out with a theory that helps you understand yourself, imagine yourself, and exist in India, in my current understanding, this is impossible. This is my current understanding. You cannot theorize Muslims in India today. The only option you have is the option of strategy. You engage with analyzing, India. I'm not talking about, how Muslims imagine themselves. I'm not talking about that, because there are scholars who do that. Maulana tried to do that. There are many other people like Paul tried to do that. Muslim sellers, Muslim politics. You have many people. When I say in India, I'm not talking about relationship between Muslims and others. I am talking about engagement of Muslims with institutions. I don't think that can be theorized. It's not possible, in my current understanding, and we can discuss that if we have time and we would like to do that, we can discuss that. Now, correct to the constitution question. I think and this is one thing that I try to discuss a little bit deeper in the podcast that I can go with while being the Jews. I was very fascinated by Azad's framework. Very fascinated by it. I'm not sure if that is a foolproof method, a very solution to the problem, I don't know. But whatever I engaged with, I found it fascinating. There may be limitations to it. he tried to link the constitution with the theology. This is very fascinating to me. Why? He said, you can assume that all the religious communities in India, they believe at the very core in one God. At the very core, God will remember. And Quran says, come to common terms between me and you, that we all believe in one God. And therefore, the constitution can be seen as a document that came out of their understanding. That's a very fascinating way. It may have its own limitation, but that's a very fascinating way of looking at things. Connect theology within a document that is there. It is not a theology. What is a constitution? A constitution is an agreement between people. It is an agreement of existence. It is not a theological document that it is going to define your life. No, it is not. It is not a supreme document that it is going to define your life in every sense. No. It is a document that you have agreed to publicly live with each other. It's a standard, that's it. It is nothing more. Okay? So that is, I'm not saying as I said earlier, I have not been able to engage with this idea deeply. So I do not know what are the limitations. But since you asked this question about it, I think this is one fascinating understanding which I personally would like to dig further. Whether it is possible, not possible, what are the limitations, what are the problems. But this is one thing that I have seen. There is another idea which people talk about, the idea of Mutahida, Promian and all those things. That again is a strategical framework. If you say that that's a theoretical framework, that is not a theoretical framework. Why? Because it is created to find the solution to a problem in a particular context. Okay? You change the demography. The very idea of Mutahida Promian would not remain relevant. It's a strategic framework to deal with the problem. So I will not call it a theoretical framework in that sense. So that is how I would look at the idea of constitution. One last point which I think is very important here, and I think I watched this video of scholars, and I again found it very, very fascinating. We said, let us assume that the government tomorrow promotes alcohol. Would you take alcohol? Would not. Why? Because the religion does not allow you. Tomorrow the government says that women cannot wear hijab. Would you accept it? You would not accept it. Because the religion says you have to. So it doesn't matter what the government says. You will always, as a Muslim, as a community, try to come out with strategies to cope up with it. So it is not that it is binding on you. And then you engage with the scholars, say that, see, this is becoming too difficult for me. I'm not able to come out of it. So the law is there that prevents you, but the religious obligation, affiliation and everything else continues to exist. So the law, whatever we get, cannot replace for you. So I don't think it's a problem of who is suffering, who is not suffering. It's a problem of, as far as I think, it is a problem of, it's a question of strategy. How you strategize the problem at hand and how you try to find solution.
Yes. So, thank you for your talk. And I had one observation and also a question. See, the observation is, I'm not sure about Maulana Azad's connection of contribution with the Quran, but the example that you have cited, it feels to be a pretty incoherent extrapolation of Quranic information to every path to find common ground. Because the Quran invites talking about another kitab. So yeah, another kitab. It's all in this line. So there it seems to be pretty immoral waste of tradition. I'm not sure, I do not know the entire discourse, so I would hope that there is more to it. That's one. Two, the question is pretty elementary. Let us say I have listed down a few names of public intellectuals when it comes to outside Muslim sphere. Anuntiyoy, Ulul Packer. So you have a few names within Muslim spheres. Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right on your first observation that the Quranic principle applies to Herodita. Absolutely, you're on the point. But this Quranic principle theorizes the relationships. It theorizes the relationship with Muslims and Herodita.
So it defines
It defines.